Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So this afternoon, me and my friends from Group One are gonna do a presentation about the topic, which is the attitudes of British people. And the next slide is our group's members. The first one is Seni Marcella, and next.
Nurul Melawati.
And Lucy Nur Aini.
Okay, so we gonna start to the first slide. The first one is introduction. The British, like the people of every country, tend to be attributed with certain characteristics which are supposedly typical. There are three reasons to be cautious about accepting such characterization too easily of British people. The first one is stereotypes and change. The second one is the English versus British. And the third one is multiculturalism. So the first topic is stereotypes and change. Societies change over time while their reputation lag behind. Many things that are often regarded as typically British derive from books, songs, or plays, which were written a long time ago and no longer representative of modern life. For example, the popular belief that Britain is a land of tradition. The claim is based on what can be seen in public life and on centuries of political continuity. Another example is the annual ceremony of the state opening of Parliament, the ceremony of trooping of the colour, and the changing guard outside of Buckingham Palace. And this is another example of the British stereotypes. The first one is London's famous red buses. The government ruled that all buses had to stay red because that is what the people of London wanted, and the government believed it would help the tourist trade. So it's like the icon of London. The second one is the Exquisite Taxi. It was introduced onto the streets of London in 1994, and it is actually an exact replica of London taxis back in the 1930s. The third one is stereotype image of the London city gent, includes the wearing of a bowler hat, but actually they don't wear the bowler hat anymore in this century because it's like so ancient and so old. And in the next slide, we have another example of the British stereotypes. The traditional English breakfast that preceded by cereal with milk and followed by toast, butter, and marmalade, baked beans, sausages, hash browns, bacon, eggs, sauteed mushrooms, and all washed down with a lot of tea. And next is the image of British as a nation of tea drinkers. And as for the tradition of afternoon tea with biscuits, scones, sandwiches, or cakes, largely confined to retired people and the leisure upper middle class. So they usually, the people who usually do the afternoon tea is just like people who on a upper middle class or the tourists to London. And the last one is the stereotypes that British love queuing. The stereotypes is commonly known as the British habit, but actually in 1992, a survey found that waiting in line at the supermarket or bank was about 2 to 3 minutes, and the Sunday Times newspaper think it wasn't reasonable to line up like for 2 to 3 minutes. And next one, we have the English versus British. English cultures has dominated the cultures of the other three nations of the British Isles. It causes everyday habits, attitudes, and values among the peoples of the four nations are very similar, but they are actually not that identical. What is often regarded as typically British may in fact be only typically English, especially true with regard to one notable characteristic, which is anti-intellectualism. And what is anti-intellectualism? Among many people in Britain, there exists a suspicion of intelligence, education, and high culture. Teachers and academic staffs, although like they're respected, don't have as high as status as they do in most other countries. And surprisingly, there are a large section of both upper and working class in Britain who traditionally at least haven't encouraged their children to go to the university. And it is still unusual for parents to arrange extra private tuition for their children, even among those who can easily afford it. And the anti-intellectual attitudes are held consciously only by a small proportion of the population, but an indication of how deep they run in society is that they are reflected in English language. Evidence of this attitude can be found in all four nations of the British Isles. However, it is probably better seen as a specifically English characters and not a British one, so it's different. And the third reason for caution about generalization relates to the large-scale immigration to Britain from places outside the British Isles in the 20th century. In its cities, at least, Britain is a multicultural society. For example, there's areas of London in which a distinctively Indian way of life predominates, with Indian shops, Indian language, Indian clothes, and it's because in the local schools, up to 90% of the pupils may be Indian, and distinctively Indian style of learning tends to take place in London. And these new British people have brought widely differing sets of attitudes with them. For example, while some seem to care no more about education for their children than people in traditional English cultures, others seems to care about it a great deal more. And you can also see the pictures is London University. They are welcoming record number of Indian students to London or Britain for general. And it is therefore still possible to talk about British characteristics in general. In fact, the new British have made their own contribution to British life and attitudes. They have probably helped to make people more informal, change the nature of the corner shop. This one is corner shop. And the most popular well-attended festival in the whole Britain is the annual Notting Hill Carnival in London in these two pictures. And this carnival is held at the end of August, which is originally and inspired from the Caribbean. And the next slide is about conservatism.
Conservatism. The British have few living folk traditions and are too individualistic to have some daily habits. However, that doesn't mean that they like change. They may not behave in a traditional way, but they love symbols of tradition and stability. For example, there are very untraditional attitudes and customs associated with the family in modern Britain. However, politicians often cite their enthusiasm for traditional family values, but parents married and living together parents as the primary source of authority for children, as a way for as a way to gain support. Next, in Britain, the value of continuity is considered more important than modernity for its own sake. They don't think it's smart to live in a new house, and in fact, there is some prestige in living in a house that is really old. They have a general sentimental attachment to an older era, which was considered safer. Their Christmas cards usually depict scenes from previous centuries. They like their clothes to look old. They are reluctant to change their current system. Additionally, a look at children's reading habits shows that this attitude is not likely to change. Publishers strive to make their books for children's current, but maybe they don't need to try so hard. In 1992, two of the most popular children's authors were conspicuously murdered, but were in fact dead. Next, the most popular author of all is Roald Dahl, whose fantasy stories are set in a Greater Asian world. The second most popular author is Enid Blyton, whose stories take place in a comfortable white middle-class world before the 1916. Being different, British people are conservative and stubborn about symbols of Britishness, often combining their conservatism with individualism. Development in the EU are with suspicion and hostility, like extreme standardized measurements which Britain resist despite government efforts. There's resistance to adopting metric units, with people still using pounds and ounces for solving and thinking in Fahrenheit rather than Celsius. Even though the government promotes being different, there's resistance to adopting Europe habits, as in the case of a pub fines or of selling drinks in non-traditional sizes. The government continues to resist pressure to adopt Central Europe time and maintains a peninsular year starting in April instead of January. They take pride in being different, such as their reluctance to switch from driving on the left to the right side of the road. Next, the love of nature. Most Britons live in cities, however, they hold an idealistic vision of the countryside. For the British, the countryside lacks the negative associations found in some countries, such as poor facilities, lack of educational opportunities, unemployment, and poverty. To them, the countryside signifies peace, beauty, good health, and low crime rate. Most of them would choose to live in rural village if they believe if they could make a living there. Ideally, such village would consist of thatched cottages built around grassy areas known as village greens, with nearby ponds populated by ducks. While such villages are not very common nowadays, they represent a stereotypical image well known to the British. The history related to the construction of the Channel Tunnel provides an illustrative example of the British attitude. While the channel was being built, plans were also made to construct new, new high-speed rail lines on both sides of it. On the French side of the channel, communities competed to have the new line built through their towns, seeing it as beneficial for local business. However, the opposite occurred. On the English side, nobody wanted the rail link near them. Communities fought to have the new line built elsewhere. Regardless of business opportunities, they prioritize preserving their peace and strength. Even city dwellers actively engage in rural matters. considering in their right and privilege to visit the countryside whenever they wish. Large areas of the country are designated as official national parks, where almost no construction is allowed. Even for those unable to access the countryside, many Britons spend a significant amount of time connecting with nature. They cultivate plants, with gardening being one of the country's most popular hobbies. Even those without gardens can participate in gardening by renting small plots of land from local authorities, typically used from growing vegetables.
The love of animals. Rosendale Pet Cemetery in Landseries is just one example of an animal graveyard in Britain. As this example show, the British tend to have a sentimental attitude to animals. Next. Eh, Nearly half of the household in Britain keep at least one domestic pet. There is even a special hospital which treats injured wild animals. Perhaps this overall concern for animals is part of the British love of nature. Studies indicating that some wild species of bird or mammal is decreasing in number become prominent article in the national press. Thousands of people are enthusiastic bird watchers. This peculiarly British pastime often involves spending hours lying in wet and cold underground, trying to get a glimpse of some rare species. Okay, next. Formality and informality. Some people have drawn the conclusion from this that the British are rather formal in their general behavior. There is a difference between observing formalities and being formal in everyday life. It all depends on whether a person is playing a public role or a private role. On the other hand, when people are not playing a public role, when they are just being themselves, there seem to be no roles at all. The British are probably more tolerant of strange clothing than people in most other countries. To address someone by his or her title or to say please is to observe formalities and therefore to put a distance between the people involved. Next. Similarly, most British people do not feel welcome if If on being invited to somebody's house, they find the house in smart clothes and a grand table set for them. If you are in British person's house and you are told to help yourself to something, your house is not being rude or suggesting that you are of no importance. He or she is showing that you are completely accept and just like one of the family. Next, public spiritness and amateurism. In public life, Britain has traditionally followed what might be called the cult of the talented amateur, in which being too professionally dedicated is looked at with suspicion. So lots of people giving a little bit of their free time to help in a variety of ways. This can be seen in the structure of the civil service, in the circumstance under which perhaps do their work, in the use of unpaid non-lawyer to run much of the legal system, in some aspect of the education system, And in the fact that until recently, many of the most popular sports in the country were officially amateur, even at top level. This voluntary activity is a basic part of British life. Next, privacy and sex. The modern British attitude to sex is an example of how, while moral attitudes have changed, the habit of keeping things private is still deeply ingrained. British public life has a reputation for demanding puritanical standard of behavior. Revelation about extramarital affair or other deviation from what is considered normal in private life have in the past ruined the career of many public figures. It has happened because these activities was my was mixed up with a matter of national security or involve breaking the law or indicate hypocrisy. Okay, next. In 1992, a million copies of very explicit and realistic video with titles such as Virility, Better Sex, The Guy's Man's Guide to Safer Sex, and The Lovers Guide were sold in Britain. Example, such as the suggests the modern Britons have a positive and open attitude to sex. Okay, next. Similarly, public reference to sex in popular entertainment are very common, but they typically take the form of joking, innuendo, and clumsy double entendre. The same mixture of tolerance and embracement can be seen in the official attitude to prostitution in Britain. It is not illegal to be a prostitute in Britain, but it is illegal to publicly behave like one. It is against their law to solicit, that is, to do anything in public to find customers. Okay, next. Thank you.
All right, so there's from our presentation for the attitudes to be topic from group 1, and I guess that's all from us. And if you guys have a question for this topic, please comment down below on our LMS. So yeah, good afternoon and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.